I was in his dressing room, and they wanted to take a picture of the two of us.
I took Tom backstage, and I said, you know, Tom, I have my extra crown here, which is my reserve crown, and I want the photographer to come in, and we're going to have a cup of tea.
So Solomon said, why don't you put one of my robes on, and you have one of my crowns. I said, are you sure, Solomon, And I think he said, yeah, it'll be King Solomon and the Prince of Wales. You know what I mean? So I said, all right.
I just really liked his stuff, and he stood out as a bit special. Whenever there was another album coming out or a single or something, you had to get it.
I went to see him in a club once in London, and he must have known that I was in the club, because he said, I have a friend over here in England, and his name is Tom Jones. And he said, I just have a message for Tom. If he's anywhere here tonight, I've got to say to Tom, if you need me, I want you to call. And I went, wow, it's like I almost fell down, because he hit me like boom, and he can do that.
If you need me, call me. I said, if you need me, all you gotta do is call me. Don't wait too long and let everything in your life go wrong. If you need me, darling, call my number, and I'll bring my big fine self on home to you, baby. Listen.
Having worked with the Rolling Stones and having worked with Solomon, you could really see the evolution of a certain mindset that the Stones got from Solomon. Early on, I know they toured with Solomon, and with him, I think headlining maybe, and Keith's told me about just all the women throwing their bras and underwear and all kinds of stuff at him, and I think that had a profound impact on them,
If he's singing about Jesus, you believe it, and if he's singing about sex, you believe that too.
There's a fine line in soul music between the religious fervor and the sexual fervor, and the Stones picked up on that thing, and the Stones made sex music, and Solomon Burke made sex music.
Lord, I'm gone. Gone with baby. I won't be back no more. Lord, gone away, baby. I won't be back no more. I need somebody to help me tonight. If I don't find me a new girl, I won't get back at all.
There is an irony here that black American performers influenced the Rolling Stones and the Beatles and the Animals and so on, and they find their record sales dropping and their performances tailing off and so on, whilst the English invasion becomes so hugely successful.
When I had all of my earlier hits, Time Is On My Side and songs of that nature, what happened to black artists was the British invasion, i.e. Time Is On My Side got covered by the Rolling Stones. The Beatles came along doing cover songs of other black artists, and they kind of overwhelmed when they came to the United States. The white audiences were so looking for a white act to do the black music that would be acceptable to the white audiences. Solomon was one of them who got kind of pushed on the wayside because of the British invasion. It happened to everybody.
The Stones always said, this is a Muddy Waters song, this is a Howlin' Wolf song. And all those blues artists, and later the soul artists that we covered, because we covered an awful lot of them, we always talked about them and what an influence they were and all that, and they were forever grateful. There's a quote from Solomon when he first heard our record, Everybody Needs Somebody to Love, he was driving in a limousine. And he heard it, and the Rolling Stones, and he loved it, you know, and he talked about it afterwards to newspapers and things. So we helped to bring those people to the front and make a white audience aware of them.
White radio used to get into real difficulty playing black music records, which is why, you know, effectively it was often the white covers of the black records which were successful.
Where's Solomon? Right here. I see Don coming in now, man. Come on in the door. And then come Benny with him. Benny King, come on. Hey, man, Joe packing up his bags, man. Where you going, Joe? I'm going back to Baton Rouge, man. I thought you had a good thing going. Ain't got nothing going up here in New York, man. Listen, cause the rent up here much too high. And I'm just barely making enough money trying to get back. Listen, I can't see paying all of my rent for a room.
The Soul Clan was started by Don Corvée and myself. We saw what was getting ready to happen in America with the change, with segregation, and it was a time then to buy. It was a time to buy and to invest in our own people, in our own towns, in our own cities that we're playing and performing in. And we wanted to bring all the guys together, Otis and Wilson and Joe Tex, Benny King, and we figured we'd just call them all on the phone and say, listen, guys, we're organizing a group. It's going to be called the Soul Clan. We're going to record. We're going to write songs. And we started having meetings. Once we did record the first song, and we weren't able to get Otis on that first song, it was kind of heartbreaking. And then to go on with the group without the support of the record company, who took the record off the market after finding out we wanted to advance ourselves and use those funds to buy property and become entrepreneurs. That wasn't something that the record company wanted us to do. They wanted us to make records and sing and do shows.
I think the record industry was quite influenced by what had happened in the movie industry and the breakdown of the studio system. The whole idea of kind of any kind of artist collective or artist rights or artist seizing power would have been absolutely, in my opinion anyway, it would have really terrified record companies.
We were stopped short when we requested $1 million advance for the Soul Clan.
That's how I feel. That's how I feel.
When he left Atlantic, I think there was a period on Bell which was a good period, undeniably. There were some fine songs on Bell. Proud Mary, John Fogerty's on record as saying Solomon probably did the best version he'd ever heard.
If you come down to the river, that you're gonna find the people who live. You don't have to worry if you don't have no money. People on the river are happy to give. Big wheels keep on turning. Proud Mary keeps on burning. Rolling, rolling, rolling on the river.
And he had hits on Bell, and the music was excellent. Then he went to MGM, and that was a most peculiar period. I think there were 3 albums on MGM. There was the Electronic Magnetism, and the last one was I'm Almost Home. And between the two, he made an LP called Cool Breeze, which was actually the soundtrack to a very obscure movie.
It does it just like a cool, cool breeze, baby, like a cool breeze.
He was then searching around for fresh ideas, and the more he dissipated his talent over a variety of things, the less successful he was becoming.
I think the difficulty for black artists of that era was, on the one hand, they often started out being managed by people from the black community who were basically better hustlers. You know, that's what management was from their point of view. Now, the alternative to that was actually finding white management. They had a kind of entree into a society that a lot of the black artists couldn't go to. But then they didn't see why they shouldn't get a bigger slice of the share than the artists got. It led them into a situation where they actually didn't trust anybody. So they ended up with no management. And effectively that was, in a lot of cases, the worst choice of all.
Have you ever been alone? Honey, have you ever been sad? Did you ever really, really want someone and really need them bad, bad?
The audiences had fallen off, and sometimes the bands were simply not up to his standard. I mean, they didn't know the changes, they didn't know the songs, they didn't care. You know, this was not a contemporary kind of music. He was dealing with young kids. And I remember one New Year's Eve at Louis Showcase Lounge where he just sent the band down. He just said, okay, that's it, fellas, and got a guitar and just accompanied himself.
Now, I'd seen Black Nativity in London in the early 60s, and I'd seen Little Richard, who came on in religious white sheets and started his act with a gospel songs. Never the remotest indication that Solomon even had any kind of religious background. I mean, he didn't sing gospel material. He sang soul ballads, and he sang them with, if you like, a religious intensity. In later years, his religion became far more important in and out of the studio.
It is definitely hand in hand, the religion and his music for him. It always has been. And he believes, and he's taught us, that that is what's made him last all of these years.
The last time I saw Solomon, he had this huge chair that he sits in. And he starts off kind of like a choir, starts off really mellow and getting into the show. And as the show progresses, it gets very gospel, I mean, like a revival meeting or a camp town meeting or a tent meeting where you're having lots and lots of feeling and spiritual shouting and what have you. Yes, the only thing would be missing would be having a minister giving the sermon. And if you give him long enough, he would turn into a minister and give you a sermon. That's how his shows usually wound up.
I think in every show he's ever performed, you get some kind of gospel something out of him. He doesn't leave you that way without it, so it's a big part.
If you go to a gospel church in America, if the words were slightly different, it could be rock and roll, or it could be soul music. It's just that they're singing about God, and they're singing about Jesus. But when they say Jesus, you know what I mean? It's like, whoo, you know, it's like they want to get inside you. And that's what Solomon has. So I don't think he differentiates. If you're singing about Jesus or you're singing about a woman that you love, it still comes over in that way.
Solomon began to preach when he was 9 years old. That's really a phenomenon. And that never left him. Whatever he did in the world, or what we say in secular music, God was always there. He was always first in everything that was done.
My grandmother being a great spiritual medium and a great seer, and her friends were powerful people like Father Divine, my cousin, the great Prophet Jones from Detroit, and my godfather, the late, great Daddy Grace.
Sweet Daddy Grace was Solomon's godfather. And of course, godfathers at that time were just as important as your dad. He's very attractive to the ladies. Whatever Sweet Daddy wants, Sweet Daddy can have. Not in a derogatory way, but because they loved him because of what he would produce where religion was concerned. Brother has that same type of, I don't like control, but that same inner power to possess, to say, this is what God says. Father Divine, he was a very powerful man also. He had a very great following, as same as Sweet Daddy Grace did. Those are two key focal people that you would see in your life, so of course you're going to draw from each of them.
Daddy Grace was there as that character for so many people who needed someone to lean on during those times. Father Divine was there for the people to feed the hungry.
Father Divine had a restaurant. You could go there on Sunday and you could get a meal for 35 cents, but the meal would be fried chicken,